I'm going to take you on a whirlwind review of the subjunctive voice formation. So as we talked about last class, try and quickly retrieve why do we need the subjunctive? What do we use it for? How does it differ from the indicative mood? Pause the video and try and just retrieve that real quick. And remember, what we talked about is it kind of deals with potential situations, things that are other than just like stated fact, and so delve with less surety, more hypothetical, like not definitive reality. Okay, and Latin uses it in a lot of funky ways. Oftentimes, though, in English, we don't use the subjunctive that much, so we can kind of just translate it into the indicative in English. But in order to do that, we need to be able to know what tense it is still. That's still very important. And so the first thing we're going to do in our subjunctive review is just help you identify the tense of a subjunctive and recognize it as a subjunctive when you come across it in our reading passage. Okay? So that's the goal of this presentation. Let's get to it. We're going to start off, as you might expect, with the present tense subjunctive. And the present tense subjunctive is easy as long as you can remember the simple mnemonic device. We eat caviar or we fear a liar. And how this mnemonic device works is you get the vowel, and I kind of like we fear a liar because each word has one of the vowels. First conjugation, E. Second conjugation, E-A. Third conjugation, A, and then fourth and third IO conjugation, IA. And what are these vowels? They're the vowels that are going to replace the typical vowel you see for a verb in the present tense indicative. So in the first conjugation, you're used to seeing A's, right? Woko, wokas, wokat. Now it would be wokem, wokes, woket in the present tense subjunctive. All right. Similarly, you replace the typical vowels in the other conjugations with each of these vowel combos you see below. Let's look at some exempla. Put the following words into the present subjunctive, keeping in mind the rule, the mnemonic device we just used. I'll pause the video and then I'll explain it to you. All right. I'm going to steal your retrieval or your practice unless you pause the video now. Here we go. Demonstrat becomes demonstret because demonstrat is from demonstro, demonstrare, first conjugation. So we go to we. Mittant is from mitto, mittere. We know that unt is present tense indicative third conjugation. So we go we fear a. So it's going to be mittant now if it was in the subjunctive. And then videmus, what conjugation is that? Video, ao, ere, videre. So it's second conjugation. So I'm going to say videamus. It's we fear, ea. We fear a liar, videamus, okay? Nice. All right. So we're going to skip over these things right now. Skip over that, skip over that, skip over that. And we get to the imperfect subjunctive. All right. So the imperfect subjunctive, its rule is even easier than the present tense subjunctive. Okay? Rather, we are now not going to worry about a mnemonic device. We already know the stem. We're just going to that second principal part again, but now you don't even have to do anything to it. It's even easier than when we were dealing with the present tense subjunctive. We just have to present tense indicative. Sorry, also, when we had to go to the second principal part and chop off the RE. Now we're just going to go to that second principal part and add M's. And so you see laudarem, laudares, laudaret. And you see monerem, moneres, moneret. If you go here, you just see we're adding on MST, mustis, NT. All right, and that's the pattern. How would I translate this? Frequently, you're just going to be able to translate it like it was in perfect indicative. I was praising, you were praising, he, she, it was praising. But ultimately, the subjunctive translation is going to depend on the usage of that subjunctive, and we'll practice that more later this semester and later this year. Okay? So looking at these forms, Notice that in the passive, rather than adding MST must dissent, we're just adding R ris ter, mer mini inter. Okay, so keeping all that in mind, try and form the imperfect subjunctive for rego and audio. Let's do both of them in the active for right now. Okay, so I was ruling in the subjunctive, or I was hearing in the subjunctive. Pause the video, and I'll go over it. Ready? Here we go. Regerem, regeres, regeret. How'd I get there? Rego, regere. Second principal part is regere. So I just slap the endings onto that. Second principal part of audio is audire. And I just slap the endings onto audire. And that's how I get my imperfect subjunctive forms. Okay? So as a reminder, this is all the third, fourth conjugation, imperfect subjunctive. All right, another good thing to jot down in your notes. All right, now we're going to skip ahead again to go look at the perfect subjunctive. All right, so the perfect subjunctive is active, perfect active subjunctive, I should say, is where do we always go for the perfect active? We always go to the third principal part, and I chop off the I. And so the question is just what endings are we going to add on? And they're endings which are very similar to the future perfect indicative endings, which we haven't seen in a while, but maybe they'll ring a bell when we look at this next slide. Boom. So, taking a look at these, whereas in the future perfect indicative we had ero, eris, erit, erimus, eritis, erint. Now that ero is just changing to erim, but we've seen these endings before. So when we see the perfect subjunctive, you're just looking for third principal part plus erim, eris, erit. And your question might be, how am I going to know the difference between the two of these? And that's going to be context. If you see a word that usually introduces a subjunctive, then you can be pretty sure that you're dealing with the perfect subjunctive and not the future perfect indicative. It's also going to be pretty rare that we see the future perfect indicative, or really either of these forms. So it's not a huge deal, but we just want to be aware that this is how we form the perfect subjunctive. Okay, so we can spot it. So we add erem, eris, erit onto the end of the which principal part? The third principal part. Yes, laudawi. Great. Okay. So moving forward, the pluperfect subjunctive. All right. This is just the perfect active infinitive plus the typical active endings. Again, this is the pluperfect subjunctive in the active voice. All right. So perfect active infinitive plus the typical active endings. What is the perfect active infinitive? Can you remember that? It can be helpful sometimes to think of a specific word. Woko. What principal part do I always go to for the perfect active? Third principal part. And what do? I am just going to add on woka. I'm just going to add on that isse ending. Okay? Woka wisse. That is the perfect active infinitive. So to make it into the pluperfect subjunctive active, I just add endings onto it. Lauda wissem. I had praised. You had praised. Lauda wisset. He, she, it had praised. Okay? What I want you to do now is pause the video and we just learned a blitz of new forms. Let's pause the video and put in the third person singular of, let's do amo in the present, imperfect, and present imperfect and perfect, pluperfect, active forms. Third singular. Okay. So review: present tense, amo, amas, amat, but it's we fear a liar, so I change the a to an e. Amet. Imperfect, I go to the which principal part? I go to the second principal part. Do I have to do anything to it? Nope. I just add on the endings, amaret. Perfect, I go, as always, to the third principal part, amawi. What do I do to it? I chop off the I, and I add on an amaweret, eremereseret. He loved, he, she, it loved. And then for the pluperfect, we form the perfect active infinitive, which is wisse, and add on the endings, the appropriate ending, third singular, so T, so she, he, it had loved. Great. All right, quick review there. If we want to make these two passive, I just switch the T to a TUR, ameter, and amareter. And the only thing left for us now amongst all the subjunctive forms is to find out how do I make these two passive, okay? And how do I, what principal part do I always go to for the perfect system passive? The fourth principal part. Hopefully you are all shouted out in glee. So we go to the fourth principal part, and the question is just what are we going to put on the end to tell us who's doing the action, right? In the indicative, we put on sum es est, sumus estis sunt. In the subjunctive, we're going to put the same forms of sum, but we're going to put them in their present subjunctive form, which you might have forgotten. Sim, sis, sit, simus, situs, sint. Good way to remember that the present active subjunctive of sum is sim is to think of the idea of a simulation, right? It's a potential reality. So a sim is what I might be, right? What I could be, that potentiality, and that's what simulation comes from. It's the subjunctive of the verb sum, to be, in Latin. So we've just put those endings on, so we know we're in the subjunctive. We know we're in the perfect subjunctive. We just change it from sum, which would be in the indicative, perfect passive indicative, to sim to make it, to make it perfect passive subjunctive. Okay. Keeping that in mind, if laudatus eram is the pluperfect passive indicative, what would make sense for making laudatus eram into the pluperfect passive subjunctive? Well, if I could take eram and change it into the subjunctive, that would be nice. And noting that eram is the imperfect of sum, if I just make the imperfect subjunctive of sum esse fui futurus, second principal part, esse plus an ending, I get laudatus essem. And so we're going to see on the next slide the pluperfect passive subjunctive, laudatus essem. Okay, I know this was a lot, so the really important thing for you to do now is to try and make these forms, make synopses like we did above, and we did just before, with a couple of different verbs, and retrieve these formations and just say them aloud to yourself as you form them so that you're attaching them to tense translations. So laudatus essem, I had been praised. Laudatus esses, you had been praised. Okay, so practice this with a couple of verbs. I'll give you a little comprehension, a little Google Forms quiz to give you a little extra practice as well, where you'll be translating subjunctives into English as though they were indicatives, so just practicing recognizing that tense. And we'll talk more about it next class. All right, see you then.